Here's my variant patch notes for 10.04. We'll start with Waylay, and I think Waylay is pretty good, but I do have some concerns for her a tiny bit. I think Refract and Lightspeed are pretty good, but I think that Saturate and Convergent Paths aren't the greatest of abilities, and the reason for that is because the hinder status effect is hindering Waylay a bit, because I think that this isn't the greatest of status effects. It's okay, like it's pretty good actually. I mean, it's really good for taking fights, and it's completely fine, realistically. But I think that when it comes to the higher ends of play, like the higher levels of play, you aren't going to be wanting hinder over something like stun or flash. And that might actually impact her play rate, because she might actually be played in more of like an initiator flex slot rather than a duelist slot. But we'll just have to see, because if that is the case, then she's going to be competing with that with like ISO, Breach, KO. Like there's going to be plenty of like agents that are going to be competing with that position, and I'm not sure if this is enough to beat those agents out of that position, considering how much utility like is lacking here in comparison to those other agents. Especially because her ult generally I don't think is that strong in comparison to a lot of other ults in the game. So we'll just have to see. I'm prepared to be wrong on that. I could be completely wrong. I'd love to know what your thoughts are on the comments below as well. So Clove has been strong since their inception basically, and as a result they've been like destroying every other controller in terms of play rate, and so controller diversity makes sense to mention here for the nerf. But I do think it's maybe one patch early. The reason for that is because Fracture helped Brimstone get more play rate, Pearl helped Astra get more play rate, and Icebox has just been introduced to this same patch. So it means that we're going to see more Viper on that map. So maybe it's a bit too early. Maybe one patch later would have been better, slightly, just to see if the problem was still persisting. But it was persisting on some maps like Bind, which is rotated out. It probably will persist on Ascent, even maybe even despite these nerfs, but I doubt it. But we'll just see. I do know what the nerfs are. I've just read through them because I did an outtake. Medal no longer explodes after 1.3 second timer after casting. Explodes after contact with the ground after a 0.75 second timer. So the main thing about this is that it's going to be harder for you to take more proactive fights and actually get the decay off on people that are like instantly, if that makes sense, right? Because the main thing about the timer is that it could go off in the air and surprise people and allow them to not have much time to react to it, to dodge it, right? With this ground timer, there's a lot more time to dodge it because it has to land first and then it blows up. So it's going to be easier to react to, and overall is a nerf, but it does have the side effect of giving Clove a way to make lineups. So like more intentional cross map or like intentional like execute lineups. So it's a bit of a side grade, but it's overall a nerf, I think, to the medal. Ruse, this is the biggest nerf. 10 seconds on the cooldown of the smokes completely destroys what the smokes want to do. Mid-rounding is going to be harder. Post-plant is going to be harder because you're not going to have the post-plant and not going to have the smokes until deeper into the post-plant. So it's going to be overall a lot harder to play. Definitely attack on Clove, but maybe defense as well in certain situations is going to be harder too, because you're going to be maybe stuck for smokes if you need to support multiple people at once and that kind of thing. Or if they're faking, if they're playing a lot, if they're playing quite slow, you have to be smart with where you place your smokes because you're going to have less smokes. Pick me up. This change is kind of like negligible to me. Pick me up is a situational ability that you only use it when someone dies on the enemy team that you were actually a part of. And as a result, it doesn't get used that much overall. And on top of this as well, this move speed is only relevant if you can use it. This health buff is only relevant if you actually need the health. So this is just context upon context upon context, rather than actually being good and proactive abilities like Medal would be, right? So pick me up. These changes are kind of negligible. At flat value, 5 seconds of movement speed is quite a lot though, so I can definitely see it impacting some situations, just not that many. Deadlock. So barrier mesh changed to a non-signature ability. This is really important that they did that. I'll go into it in a second, but it's really important they did that. Cost has gone from 3 to 400. Gravinet is near the signature with 40-second cooldown. Total size decreased from 60 meters to 13 meters. Gravinet projected, doesn't matter. When an enemy removes the net, the audio cue of the net breaking now plays for all players. So that's good for like choosing when to fight. The total size decrease makes sense because it's going to be more consistently there throughout the round. You're going to more or less get 2 around, maybe more. So it makes sense to make this smaller because it's generally going to be more impactful throughout every round anyway. Yeah, it makes sense. You're going to get more uses. And the reason why I said that it was important for this to be a non-signature ability, the barrier mesh, to move there, is because if it was a signature ability and they gave it a cooldown, there'll be a couple problems that get introduced again, some of them again. The first one is, when do they place the actual cooldown? So if they place it at the start when the barrier mesh gets placed, then it means that they're going to have a really high barrier mesh uptime. If the cooldown would have started after the barrier mesh would be broken, then it means that the second barrier mesh basically would never get placed. So either way, it would be terrible. On top of that as well, it would just mean if there's multiple barrier meshes in a round, there's going to be need for more ammo, which reintroduces the problem of the spray through smoke stuff that we had a long time ago, and spray through walls and all that kind of stuff. A lot more spraying was happening back then when there was way more ammo in reserve, and obviously that's not the case anymore. So it would reintroduce that problem a bit. The problem here as well with the barrier mesh now costing credits is that it's also going to be a problem for your economy. It's 200 more than normal. And on top of that as well, it's a 400 block of credits. So it's going to be harder for some rounds to justify getting the barrier mesh. I think on pistol, you're basically always going to go barrier mesh armor, because barrier mesh is really strong on pistol if you know where you're going and you know where the enemy team is going and you can set it up in a good way. Next is ISO. ISO Undercut has changed from 2 to 1 charges, but now costs 300 and also applies a suppression. So this is pretty good. The reason why this is pretty good is I think it's adds some skill expression or skill difference to the ISOs that play, because one charge of this is going to be harder to use, but it's going to be more rewarding in the fact that you get the suppression. And it's also going to cost more as well, so if you do waste it, it's going to cost more. So it's going to be overall more rewarding for the better ISO players that utilize the undercut better. The suppression has a status effect, as I've already mentioned about status effects before with the hinder. Suppression is a bit situational, because you basically have to think that the enemy is going to want to use util within that 4 seconds, and if they don't want to use util within that 4 seconds, it's kind of useless, right? And the funny thing is, suppression plus vulnerability, they're kind of adverse to each other in some ways in that sense, because if you usually want to suppress someone that wants to use utility, but if they want to use utility, they probably won't be wanting to take a fight, so they probably won't be so the vulnerability might not matter as much, you know what I mean? They're going to be trying to avoid a fight, so therefore the vulnerability doesn't matter, but the suppression does. Or it's going to be the vulnerability matters, but the suppression doesn't. So it's kind of weird. It's kind of like an on and off switch for the two. Obviously, there are situations where both will be usable and good, because you'll catch someone off guard, and therefore the vulnerability matching matters because they wanted to use their util. You suppress them, and then you are actually punishing them with the vulnerability. So I understand that's probably what they're going for, but it's a very, very weird combination of two status effects. Contingency. Now has an alt fire cast that makes the wall move at half speed. So this is actually really good. It moves at half distance, so it gets to half distance as well, so it doesn't go as far. But it is good because sometimes the contingency would move past an angle too fast, and it would be a problem, right? So now you can move it past that angle at half the speed, so you have a lot more time to kind of take the fight properly, or just not take that fight at all before going somewhere else. That's pretty good. Double tap now receives a heavy penetration tag when the shield breaks rather than a wall tag. This basically just means that ISO is going to be slower, and it's going to be feelable for ISO players and players that kill him as well, I think. But it's not going to be too big, but it's going to be feelable. Kill contract, bug fix. If ISO does not have, okay, so this is a bug fix. So he gets an orb off of his ult without having to have double tap on. So that basically means that you don't have to use double tap at the start of the round if you want to ult at the start of the round. And it also means that you don't have to have any double taps active if you've used them all prior in the round, to then use the ult at the end to then get an orb in like a 2v2 or something, or a 3v2, 3v1, whatever, right? I mean, the orb doesn't matter in a 3v1, but you know what I mean. That you don't need to have the double taps available. You could have used them before, and then still get the orb back for the next fight or something. Next is Neon, but this is just VFX. Teo. So this Teo stuff is really important, right? One of the things is unsatisfying stalemates with the Teo and the Killjoy. The Killjoy doesn't want to place the ult, the Teo doesn't want to use guided missiles, everyone just sits there and does nothing. So this is a really important thing for them to fix. And that means that Teo is going to be more likely to be played. If it's a Killjoy map, Teo must be played with something that can also deal damage with it, like a Breach, which is normally what he's played with, or maybe something like a Phoenix with at a stretch, Sova, which is also probably not that bad with Teo as well. But yeah, something like that can break the Killjoy ult on that 5 HP. Okay, so that's it for the agents. Now we go into map updates. So Ascent and Icebox are in, Abyss and Bind are out. Personally, I like this rotation, but I understand a lot of people probably won't, because Icebox is in, and some people didn't like Ascent, people liked Bind. I'm not sure if anyone really liked Abyss that much. I don't mind it. Okay, so Ascent, they got the these bullet penetratable walls. Hang on, I need to read this. Change part of B main wall B main wall along B lane to non-pennable. Non-pennable. Is that an actual word? That's crazy. It sounds very slangy. Slangy? Is that a word? Oh well. So yeah, this wall has been changed to non-penetrable, which is really, really important because it might actually mean there's more initiator diversity because Sova is getting played a whole lot because of this wall. Well, at least one of the factors of it anyway. So we might not see a complete replacement of Sova on Ascent, but we will see a bit more diversity in that role, I think. Because this is no longer penetrable, especially in solo queue. I think we'll see a bit more diversity in that role. In pro play, it might be a bit slower, or maybe they actually do just fully go in for something else, like a Tayo, instead of the Sova or something, a Tayo Breach instead of like the normal duo of KO Sova or something like that, right? But yeah, we'll see what happens. I do think that this is actually a really, really positive change, and the rest are like console only. I don't play console, so I'll probably give you some horrible advice and some horrible thoughts on the console only, so I won't do that. So yeah, hopefully you enjoyed, and if you have any questions about what I've talked about, if you think I've missed something or if I'm wrong about something, I'd love to know in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in my next one.